Good evening. Welcome to the Good Man Paradigm. My name is Imogen Hobbs. I am the men's coach and founder of Change Channel Coaching. I am also the host of this episode, or the Good Man Paradigm. And tonight we will be talking about nobody taught you how to be a man. They just taught you repetitively and punished you for what it was that you were getting wrong. And I really want to open this conversation up around generational inheritance, around parenting, and how that influenced you versus how that's playing out for you now and where you are in your life right now. So these episodes are streamed live. So if you are watching this live, please drop a comment in the chat bar for me. Say hello. Let me know where you're listening from. If you have any questions as we are moving through this, if there's topics that you're resonating with or something that makes you think about an aspect of your life or, make something clear for you, please drop it in the comments. I would love to make this more of a dynamic conversation. And for those of you who want me to have conversations with other people, it's coming. They are coming. But so let's get into tonight's topic. Nobody taught you how to be a man. They just punished you for doing it wrong. What I see so much of with my clients, and I've worked with over 726 clients now over 4 years, and what I see so much with them is childhood behaviours coming out in adult life. And I actually caught a reel of Joe Hudson earlier today, and he said, you can tell someone's childhood in the way that they apologize. And I thought, that hits the nail on the head. So many people apologize profusely, and they explain things, and they want to make up for getting it wrong, and they want to prove that they weren't trying to be malice, or they weren't trying to, get it wrong. And how many of our childhoods, how many people do you know around you that grew up being really encouraged and really supported, versus how many childhoods or how many people around you had childhoods where parents were absent? Maybe they were low income. Maybe parents were working 2 and 3 jobs. Maybe there wasn't a lot of time. Maybe there was abuse in the household. Maybe there was neglect in the household. Maybe there was narcissism in the household. And when we grow up around those things, it impacts how you show up in your daily life. Because you don't just learn something when you're a child, you're imprinted with an operating system. That's the program. And not only that imprinting is in your DNA. It's in your makeup because you got it from your parents, your mother and your father. And so many people are out there trying not to be their parents, but there are always going to be ingrained rivers that run through us of those programs, echoes of those programs, no matter how much work we do. And that's not to say that it's always going to be that bad. It's more around understanding that that's your imprinting, and you came into this life with that imprinting. And that's generally going to be your lesson for this life, is to understand that, to shift that, to open it up, to change it. But one of the things that I talk to about with the guys in coaching all of the time, we actually did a coaching session on this subject yesterday, which is free in my free men's community. We can send you the links and everything like that if you would like them, but there's replays in there. And this session, what we talked about was, how did your parents raise you? How did that work out for you? How are you showing up to that? But what are the echoes of it that run through your life. And so maybe alcoholism was in your family. Maybe that's a go-to mechanism for you. Maybe there's addiction there, and maybe you learnt that from your parents. Maybe that was a coping thing for them to manage their lives or their workloads or their pressures or the stress or the frustrations of life or the lack of understanding. And so maybe they drank, and maybe that's something that rubbed off on you. And what happens when you stop drinking? You know, like if you can conquer that mountain in your life and you stop drinking, how does that addiction then, or that tendency then, resurface? Because generally it's looking for a way to come out, and you can get better at managing it. You can get better at listening to it. You can get better at the invitation that it brings. So what I'm not saying is that you will always be handicapped by the limitations of being a product of your upbringing and being a product of your parents. But what I am saying is that it becomes your signaling system. It becomes a system, a way of functioning that signals to you, literally, hey, we're going into a stressed state because we're doing that thing again, right? That would be like if you notice that alcohol, so if we use the alcohol example, because a lot of people struggle with that. And alcohol is something that you reach for when you're stressed, when you're uncomfortable. If it's the thing when you go to a social event that makes you feel more comfortable around other people, it's, you know, lubrication. It allows you to relax. It allows you to anxiety to come down a little bit. Allows you to feel more comfortable. Then what happens when you take that away? What happens when you stop doing that? What do you understand about yourself when you then go into those situations? But what happens to that tendency? Where does it go and where does it resurface? So one of the guys last night said, in the coaching session, he said that alcohol was his tendency. That was one of the things that he went to when life was stressful. And then now, when he struggles with that, he cleans instead. And one of the things that we talked about was alcohol and drugs generally make things messy, and the opposite of that is clean. So maybe when we are not having this, you know, like mess over here that is submitting to that tendency, we go towards hyper control and cleanliness. Because the pressures will build up inevitably in life. And so if alcohol is your drug of choice to hold or navigate the stress and the pressure of life, what happens when you take it away and the stress gets applied? How does that come back out? How does that resurface in your life? I'm just going to read this really quickly. So David Kane, hi, says, I'll fuck shit up in a second, but if I had $1 for every time I'd say sorry, I'd be a billionaire. Yeah, because we're constantly trying to make up for all of the things that we've done wrong because of like our experience, or potentially for men particularly, the experience of shame and punishment. So it can be a bit like, I feel nervous using this this description in this forum, but if you think about training dogs, right, you can either use aggression and punishment and yelling to train a dog, which makes it cower and makes it, you know, veer away and you know, like shake, and you can see the visual representation of what that format of training does. Or you can train dogs with boundaries and with rewards. And so frequently what we're used to is telling people what we don't want. Your parents made you aware of what they didn't want. They didn't want you to fail. They didn't want you to be They didn't want you to be dumb. They didn't want you to get bullied. Like they wanted you to be smart. They wanted you to get good grades. They wanted you to do well. They probably wanted you to be better than what they were. But generally, the method for bringing that in and delivering that and telling is punishment or annoyance when it doesn't go the right way. There are lots of really, well-educated kids that came through school that are now in their adult life pushing themselves for achievement and striving for perfection and pushing to be the best and to get it right and to, do so well. And when you ask about enjoyment or love or playfulness or messiness, like to be able to experiment and play around in your life and figure it out, there's no room for that. And did your parents ever tell you they were proud of you? Did they ever tell you what they loved for you doing? Or did they always tell you what they didn't like? What wasn't acceptable? That you needed to be quieter, that you needed to achieve more, that you needed to do better in school, that you needed to be a better version of yourself with no pathway created for how to do that. But not only that, no example of what that looks like. I hear this from, particularly, again, because I work with men exclusively, so I hear this from fathers a lot around what they want for their kids, the outcomes that they would like their children to be able to achieve because they didn't, because they couldn't. But your children are learning from you, not what you say. And you were learning from your parents, not what they said. You were learning from what they did, how they operated, the energy that they felt to be around. That would be I think the new age way of saying that would be the vibe. But what was that energy like to be in? Did you walk into a house that was stressed and aggressive and uncomfortable, or did you walk into a house that was full of love and affection and encouragement? Were your parents wanting you to do better, meanwhile they were working 2 and 3 jobs, struggling to keep everyone afloat? You learn from what you experience. That is the lead by example. If you want your children to operate in a different way to what you do, then you need to learn how to operate in a different way to what your parents taught you. That's I'm just checking out your comments, David, Rad. I think that's one of the underpinning things, is that so many people say, like I want them to do better than I did. I want them to have better opportunities than I had. So I slave away and I do all of this for them. But there are many, many kids that grew up in wealthy families that say, I never saw my parents. I don't really know my dad. He was never there. He was always working. I think that's a common thread between low and high income families. Parents are working so hard to give their kids a life that they couldn't have, that they create lives just like their parents. We become the replica. We are the mini-me because you taught us how to be. You don't grow up in a low-income family with high-income opportunities and morale and vision. You grow up in a low-income family knowing that you have to work hard, you have to show up, you don't have time to be sick, you don't have time to take care of yourself, that it is more important for you to work and earn money because money equals freedom. That is what a lot of us were taught. And that if you weren't ticking those boxes, you would get punished. And so primarily, so many people grew up thinking that they had to be better, that they had to get it right, that they can't take risks, that they need to be sure, that they need to calculate, that they need to have confidence before they can act. Because we were taught through families that represented the values of working hard to survive, to provide. You don't get what you want. You don't create what you want. You create what you know. And I remember my inner child, 5 years ago, my inner child healer, I remember she said to me, she really humbled me with this, and it's stuck with me forever, and I've said it to many people, is that I said, like, I feel like this is so slow. I feel like this is such a slow process. I feel like I'm not getting results fast enough, and it's so slow. And she said, Imogen, what I'm hearing you say is that it's been 4 weeks of 34 years. And I was like, point taken. But I'm an overachiever. I push. I'm relentless. And that doesn't always work in my favor. And I think that across the board, you could start to look into, what are my tendencies? What did I learn from my parents? I said to the guys last night, look at your mum and dad with perspective, not with blame. There's no blame in this, right? Your parents didn't, you might have had a terrible childhood. Generally, our parents were doing the best they could with what they had. For some of them, what they had was not much. And they probably weren't set up or supported. Not many were. But they were just doing the best they could with what they had generally. And so there's no blame when you look at it in this process, but look at your parents with perspective and just have a look at their habits. Have a look at their behaviours. And map how those things impact and show up in your life. Map how those things run through or have tentacles into the way that you show up. It might not look the same. You might be trying to, like I said earlier, you might be trying to outrun your parents. But those themes will still show up in your life, because that's the hand that you were dealt. And you can definitely change it. You can definitely understand it in a different way. It can rule your life and create the reactions that you throw out into the world. Or it can become the signaling system that you understand and you listen to navigate your life in different ways, to know when you're getting stressed, to know what's showing up when you are under pressure, when you're unhappy, when you're not prioritizing yourself, when you might be getting sick. It can be the navigation system that tells you when you're about to take a big risk, a big leap. It can tell you when you're about to go into a period of growth, if you know how to listen to it, which is if you understand yourself. I'm just going to have a quick read of some comments. Spot on. I didn't have a relationship with my dad at all, except when he was beating me because I was a little shit to mum. Yeah. And I never heard the words, I love you, until I was 22 going to rehab. Yeah. And David, I know a bit of your story, and I know that that's been a hard route, but it is so much of the, like, we were punished for what we did wrong, but we weren't praised for what we did right. And what did you say? I still want the cheat sheet so that I can do this quicker. I'm going to jump into that, which is one of the conversations last night around wanting to go from wherever you are right now, whether that's self-aware, whether that's just realizing that you need to do some work on yourself, whether that's realizing that you've never prioritized yourself, whether that's realizing that you're an addict and you don't want to be anymore and you really want to put in the work to change that, whatever that is, it's going from looking at going where you are right now to the person that you want to be, which means that you have to understand your childhood. You have to understand what happened and what the imprints were and what the impacts of that were to get you to this point. But so many people want to get to where they're going and leapfrog that whole piece in the middle, which is your growth. That was my moment of this is not going fast enough. That was that moment. And because we feel like this is an inconvenience. This space between where you are right now and where you want to be is an inconvenience. And that, the way that I would put this to you and how I thought about this after the coaching session last night is that is like saying, sitting down to a delicious meal and wanting to bypass the eating experience and just get to the point where the food is in your belly and you're digesting it. Those are the parts that you miss. When you are working on yourself, you get to learn who you are. You get to learn how you function. You get to learn what your dysfunction is, which is not a pleasant experience for sure. And I spoke to one of the guys who was coming through phase 2 a little while back, and he said around a psychologist wanting to get into his childhood, and my response to that was like, you need to take that opportunity. Like, you don't have to have had a bad childhood. So many men say to me, but Imogen, my childhood wasn't that bad. It doesn't matter. It's relative only to you. Your childhood impacts only you. And if you have siblings, they had a different childhood to you, right? Every child gets a different experience of their parent. And so your childhood is relevant only to you, which means that it's forged the version of you that you are in the world. It doesn't matter whether it was good or whether it was horrific. But it does matter to understanding who you are and how you show up in the world. I've got clients right now that are looking to 10x their business and trying to hold on to everything so that nothing goes wrong, nothing gets messed up. And when I look at things like that, when I look at so many of the guys' responses, it's a lack of trust. And generally that's because we haven't seen anyone demonstrate safety and truth and honesty in a regulated way in the world and do it well. And as adults, we forget that we need role models. We forget that we don't know everything. So many men I get on the call with and they say, I should be able to fix this for myself. I should be able to do better. With what information? With what understanding? The knowledge you have got you to the position that you're in right now. We need to update the information to be able to change it. But if you're in it, how do you see your way out of it? Especially if you haven't learnt the skills, right? I'm 15 plus years deep into my own self-development. That's how long I've been working on myself. And I still have a lot of time where I need to get people that are outside of me to help me to see the place that I'm in. Because when you're in it, you're experiencing it. You often don't also get the perspective of what it looks like and what all of the options are outside of you. Growth doesn't happen in isolation. Look at the relationships that your parents had. Were they happily married? Were they loving? Were they affectionate? Were they safe? Were they stable? Did they yell at each other? Did they have arguments or disagreements? Did they talk through it, or did they throw things? What did that version of love look like? Were you able to talk about things that happened to you? Was there a safe environment where you could communicate about what you were experiencing in the world? Or did you have to bottle that up and swallow it? And was that what you were taught? We don't talk about our problems. For men, that's pretty common. Toughen up, dry your eyes, princess, cup of concrete, harden the fuck up, get on with it. What were you taught about love and emotion and connection? And how is that, again, being portrayed in your life? One of the guys last night in the coaching session said that there was his mum was avoidant. And then there's a repetition of avoidant relationships in life. That's no surprise. You can't program a system with a program and then expect it to operate in a different way. We're doing this with AI and all of that stuff at the moment. It's like it's programmed to operate in a specific way. Even games, right? There's lots of people who are into games. I'm not, but there's parameters and there's boundaries and there's coding on that means that it will operate in a certain way, which means you can't do this over here. Which is the cheat sheet, right? How do I just scrap my programming? How do I just wipe the slate clean? Well, that would be getting out of your human experience. You contracted in, you asked for this life, you showed up in it. You're here in your skin, in your body, with your parents and your siblings and your family. You asked for it. You showed up to it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. And how much of our lives do we spend trying to escape who we are because we don't like it? And we want the cheat sheet so that we can escape that, so that we can be someone else. But you have to understand that to be someone else, you have to do the work to change the way that you understand life. To open up your eyes, to open up your mind, to open up your heart to you. First and foremost, you're the most important person in your world, because if you are full, if you are passionate, if you are happy, if you are loving, if you're nurturing yourself, that doesn't mean to say you can't be driven, you can't be working on creating something big, that you have to have all good days and that it always has to be positive. It doesn't. There's ebbs and flows of life. But if you are that version of yourself that is in pursuit of passion and in pursuit of who you are, everyone around you will get a better experience. Everyone around you will have a different experience. And that's how you teach your kids to live a different life. You have to live it. Lead by example. Hold the values. Hold your standards and learn what they are and put in the work to get yourself there. It is work. It's hard work. I remember I was, for about 3 months, just sitting in contemplation and doing a lot of work with a couple of different practitioners at the time. And I felt exhausted on a regular basis because internally we're reconfiguring an entire operating system. That is how you operate on a daily basis, how you wake up in the morning, how you talk to yourself in your head, all of the self-doubt, all of the devil on your shoulder that you're constantly wrestling with, how you go to work, how you communicate with your friends, how you show up to your life, how you go to the gym or workout or community or things like that, how you message people, what you look for in that. That's your operating system. It isn't the big, enormous things that we do. It is our small, daily, consistent habits. And if you look from yours to your parents, there's probably not that much difference. I'm just going to jump in and have a look. Just having a quick read of these comments. David, you are an absolute legend. You keep showing up. And he's off to AA, so that's great. I think you said a little bit earlier that yeah, 44 in addiction and working on yourself. It's amazing, right? Like, that's a lifelong journey and a lifelong battle. And these are the belief systems that we've inherited. And these are the expectations that we have of men in the world also. It's the way that men were raised, the way that women were raised as well, right? But the way that we view men's roles, the way that we expect that men will behave, the identity and the self-awareness that they will carry. As women, we say we want, grounded, really aware men, but there's so much work that we have to do to be ready for that, and vice versa. But healing doesn't happen in isolation. Growth doesn't happen in isolation. We have to keep choosing ourselves. We have to keep choosing to step up to that. But many people, and this is going to be another conversation for sure, but many people want a different relationship to the one that their parents had, and they want a healed relationship to step into. But healing doesn't happen in isolation. Growth doesn't happen in isolation. We need collaboration to be able to move through that. There's only so much that you can do on your own. There is a lot that you can do on your own. And there's a lot that you need to do on your own so that we don't create more codependence. But there is a point at which you reach a relationship where you can see and feel that it has changed. Men were not meant to marry their mothers, yet so many do. Women were not meant to marry their fathers, yet so many do. Because we're creating what we know, not what we want, what we know, what we're programmed with. And when you want to break that cycle, that's going to be uncomfortable. It's not the rosy journey that we would like it to be. It's uncomfortable because you're literally trying to break a lifetime's worth of behavior. You're trying to break up with that and trying to create something new, something different. That's going to feel messy. That's going to feel awkward. That's going to need a lot of to and fro conversations before it starts to normalize, before it starts to become real, before it starts to become practiced and comfortable and familiar. And being able to look at your parents and look at the traits that you loved and the traits that you didn't, and identifying what you want to keep and what you want to let go of. The invitation for you from this episode is to look at yourself, look at your parents, look at your grandparents, look at the influences, look at the patterns, look at what you don't. It's really uncomfortable, but look at what you don't like. Because generally the things that trigger us that we don't like are the reflections of ourselves that we're not ready to deal with just yet. So look at the things that you don't like and then be really honest with yourself. How do you do those things? How do they show up in your life? How are those tendencies coming through in the way that you operate? Because they will be. We think we can outrun them. We think we can outgrow them. We think we can clear them out and they're completely gone. But I think that there's always going to be echoes of that show up. And that's your signaling system. And that's your challenge, to learn what your signaling system is teaching you based on where you've come from and where you want to go. It's your life. No one can lead it but you. No one can change it but you. And nobody can live it but you. And the most important aspect of that is that nobody can enjoy your life for you. You have to figure that part out, and that's the beauty, and that is the invitation. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. This is the Good Man Paradigm, episode 8. I'll be back again with you next Thursday night. And like I said, we'll have some guests on soon, so I'm pretty excited for that. And I will see you next week.